Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 137 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is
Max Colville.
How are you doing today, Max?
John, it's kind of sort of the beginning of football season.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. Are you like breathlessly reading like every Patriots training camp report?
I am like I follow a lot of like beat reporters, so like
Yeah.
they're telling like, oh, the offense is not up to snuff yet. And, like,
I know. I was going to say I'm sort of breathlessly following every Patriots training camp report because it sounds delightful to see what the beauty of a Matt Patricia and Joe Judge run offense is going to look like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like Bill's been there plenty of years before, so maybe he has some idea of what he's doing. So
Yeah. I mean, it could be fine. They did well last year, so who knows? But yeah, it's funny. No, Eagles. This is like the most like psyched Eagles fans have been in a really long time. I feel like because the Super Bowl season came out of nowhere, and even kind of coming off of that, I felt like there was a little bit of bad mojo. And we've kind of been trying to like lift ourselves up back since then. But it feels like the season where the team is in a good place, and whether Jalen Hurts is going to be the quarterback of the future, we still need to decide. But I think everybody's sort of like, well, if he's not, then we're going to not be in a, the rest of the team is good, and we have assets to get a quarterback, and we'll go for it next year. So it feels positive to be an Eagles fan, which is not normal.
Yeah, and like we said, kind of sort of. So they're doing like the first week of preseason games this week, and like so we'll see all the third stringers. not really starting football yet.
No, it won't get toward the end. Well, they'll play quarters, but still, it's very exciting. It's fun to have all that back, and I know fall is my favorite time of year between the start of football and the quality of the movie calendar, generally speaking. So
yes,
we're close.
We know that John is not a pumpkin spice fan.
I'm not, though. It's true.
We've had this discussion.
Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, that's great. You all can enjoy that. I'm gonna revel in all the other elements of fall that I love. But yeah, I'm excited for our podcast. Even though it's not fall, I feel like we've got some good movies to talk about today, because we are going to invite ourselves into the Sound on Sight panel and give ourselves votes for our top 10 list, ostensibly of the best movies of all time, favorite movies of all time. We'll talk about how we went about sort of assembling our list, but we are going to do sort of like our pantheon of movies, which is fun. And it's fun. It was fun to put together mine. It's something that like I've not really ever thought too much about, because it feels like a daunting question. But I was excited to work on this. I'm really excited to hear yours, because I don't know. I have a few like guesses of movies that I think may be in your top 10, but I don't actually know your list. So I'm curious to find it out. And we're going to do that. And we're going to just see, this might be a slightly longer episode than normal. So we might, skip some of our usual stuff. Maybe we'll include it, maybe we won't. We're going to play it by ear. But just quickly before we get to our list, there was one news item that felt worth discussing, because it was maybe like the first salvo in the end of the streaming wars, right?
Right. And it's funny, John, because it's just like everyone felt like they were all in on streaming, and certainly during the pandemic, I mean, that was where you wanted to be, because, well, people weren't gathering in movie theaters.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, when Warner Brothers made the merger with Discovery, new leader was installed, and he has different ideas for how to take the company, and that included ending massive projects, including the what I've heard was upwards of $90 million Batgirl feature film that was supposed to debut on HBO Max. I think a Scooby-Doo animated feature was also included in that tax evasion kind of like tax credit thing that they're trying to do.
Basically, yeah, right.
So there's a big change for what HBO Max is going to look like. People were threatened that like oh, maybe the service is entirely going away. That's not necessarily true. It is going to change next year again,
Yeah.
with an influx of Discovery stuff. I also know that the general hit movie, Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann feature, came out on digital platforms today to purchase, but it's the first movie since HBO Max really started doing it with like Tenet and stuff that uh, didn't come out on HBO Max 45 days after the theaters. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's wild that like they went so hard on streaming. I mean, you're talking about like, yeah, it seemed like everybody was going in on streaming with the pandemic, but nobody went in harder than HBO Max and Warner Brothers. And they did all of their entire 2021 slate of movies, for better or worse, was all day and date with theaters and streaming. And now for that, I mean, the announcement in Variety just says they have readjusted the company to focus on theatrical features. I'm just like, we're 8 months away from, their biggest movie from The Matrix Resurrections, getting pushed right to the platform on the day of its release. So it's just wild. But it is what it is, I guess. I'm not, I mean, it's hard to say, like, the Batgirl thing and Scooby Doo Holiday Hunt, like, I wasn't gonna watch either of those movies, so I'm like, oh well, what do I care? But at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm empathetic to the fact that like people spent months trying to get these things going and working on them, and there's gonna be nothing to see of it. So that's, I mean, that's really shitty, to be honest. And they're gonna like write it off basically. So that sucks. But I guess that's just like the nature of the business these days with these companies that are way bigger than any single one project for the most part, you know, having to figure out how to make money. I assume they're making probably plenty of money, but not as much as their competitors, and they got to make some moves. I think everybody's sort of probably reckoning with that to some extent or another, except for maybe Disney. But yeah, that's it's a big one. It feels a little bit like the last time we had a big like industry wide sort of war like this was over high def digital products, and this is like when Disney said, "Hey, we're in with Blu-ray," and it's like, "Oh no, we were all in with HD DVDs."
yeah, that was the end of
And
that.
you sort of see how that all kind of like fizzles out. So I guess HBO Max is not going to be probably with us for too much longer. But so it is.
John, before we head to our main feature, though,
Mm-hmm.
I had one quick aside for the film lovers out there.
Okay.
Uh, there is a new book that people
Oh.
who love film might be interested in, and that is Michael Mann's Heat 2 novelization. It came out today, the day we were recording, and it's funny. Like I was like, how does this work? I'm like, who is he hunting? And then like I read the synopsis. He's like, oh, so he's supposed to be hunting like Val Kilmer's character. And like, even though I just watched Heat like 2 or 3 months ago, like I was like, did he really survive? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess he did. And so like I could kind of see like where that story could continue. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people excited to pick up that book.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited. I'm definitely going to check that out. I was trying to think of some like funny subtitles for Heat 2, like Heat 2 Hotter, The Heatening, uh, a whole bunch of things like that. But yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I remember when I first saw it back when I was on Twitter, the announcement that there was gonna be Heat 2. I just like almost fell out of my chair because I assumed it was a movie, and then I saw it as a book, which like books are cool too. I'm gonna read the book, I swear. But I would have been, I probably more jazzed if it was going to be a movie. And to be totally honest, I forgot until like 2 days ago that this was coming out, so I didn't pre-order it. But no, I'll pick it up. I'll read it for sure.
Yeah, I think Michael Mann is like, oh yeah, I'd love to make this, and like maybe after his Ferrari movie, he'll like make this. Obviously, he'd have to recast the roles. But
I'm gonna go see the Ferrari movie like 18 times because I know it's gonna need to make probably a lot of money for them to greenlight a Heat 2 movie. Yeah, I'm just gonna sleep in the theater and buy all the Ferrari tickets for myself.
sounds good.
But yeah, so we'll do our top 10 list. So, can you tell like I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you tell like the listeners a little bit about like what this group is and like what this list is?
Yeah, I can do a little bit because I was looking into it myself, like
Yeah.
some of the previous polls, and I guess for like um a, at least 3 or 4 decades, right? They've been they, as in the BFI and the international film magazine known as Sight and Sound,
Hmm.
have done these critics lists where they've invited critics and directors to make top 10 lists and submit them and sort of get a consensus vote on where people in the know consider to be the top films of all time. According to like the critics top 100 like blurb that I'm looking at, they said uh like it's a they believe that their poll is regarded as the most trusted guide,
Okay.
and apparently Citizen Kane topped the poll every decade from 1962 to 2002 until the last poll, which was in 2012, when Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo took over the number one spot, pushing
I
Citizen Kane.
remember that. I remember that happening. That was like people made, I don't want to say made a big deal out of it. I guess that is a big deal, but felt like people were like kind of flipping out, like, oh my gosh. So, so yeah, so that was the last list, and I guess we've got another one coming later this year. They've already solicited the submissions and votes, right?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people posting, fellow critics who were asked to participate in at least the last week or so. I've said they finally submitted their picks. So we'll see what happens. John and I decided it would be fun to think about what our top 10 would be, um, just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, is this like we're like list crashers here?
Yeah, maybe.
We're just kind of like sneaking in and pretending like we know the uncle's cousin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, so we're gonna do our top tens, and then my maybe your also honorable mentions. Do you want to start? We'll go in reverse order.
Okay, we'll go in reverse order. Let's see. I want to make sure that I have the outline open, so I want to make sure that I go in reverse order without like spoiling
Don't
things.
say you're number one.
No, I'm gonna go. What? I'm not gonna pull a Spike Lee.
But did Spike Lee do that?
Yeah, well, that's the Titan thing where he like revealed that
Oh, as
Titan
like a
won.
can, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do you want me to go first?
No, I found it.
Okay, no worries.
So the first movie I saw alluded to this in the newsletter. If you follow there, that I wanted to include Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind
Okay,
on my 10.
so that's your first movie. So before you talk more about that movie, I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you was just kind of big picture was like, was there any sort of like guidelines you gave yourself when you were making your list?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think like that I had to um say like I need to pick films older than the year 2000. I saw like maybe some people make that consideration. I
Hmm.
mean, like maybe now you'd make the consideration like maybe they have to be older than 2010 in some
Sure, right.
ways because at
Yeah.
least they'd be that decade old. But outside of that, uh, I'm trying to think of what else. It was very hard for me to like limit it to like one per country, but I
Oh
definitely
wow.
tried to like limit it to like one per director, even though there's some
Oh
directors that I feel really strongly about, like multiple films
yeah,
of theirs.
yeah.
Um, but I tried to keep it one per director.
It's funny you say that because that was really kind of like my only like guiding principle too was I didn't want to have multiple films from the same director, and there was a few. I think there was probably one that would have cracked the list if I didn't have that rule. And then there's a few others that are like in my honorable mentions that I sort of excluded because they're by a same director or something that made the list. So funny that you had that same kind of idea. But Eternal Sunshine, so is one of your picks. Tell us just what makes that worthy of your SOS top 10.
Yeah, yeah. So I was writing about Eternal Sunshine recently because Kino Lorber released a beautiful 4K release of it. I was very happy to have one of my favorite films.
I think you talked about it last week or last episode, honestly, or
I
maybe
did.
you did offline because that was sort of how we got to this topic.
Yeah, I did, and so yeah, I wanted to include it on this list. I mean, like, it's probably like it might be an unconventional entry in some people's minds if they're thinking for like trying to hit all like major tenets of international film and stuff like that. But I just always thought that this film was really clever, had some fantastic performances, and is endlessly rewatchable. And I think I owe that mostly to not only the cast but the script by Charlie Kaufman, as he's one of my favorite screenwriters.
Yeah, I think this is either this or Being John Malkovich, probably my favorite scripts of his. And but I think this is probably the one that like maybe most people would jump to.
Yeah, right. I mean, but he's done a lot of fantastic
Oh,
scripts.
totally. I love Adaptation too, and I've even several since then that have been really acclaimed, if maybe a little bit more divisive than his first few that seemed like they were pretty unassailable. But yeah, it's definitely like a super original movie, and I think that for me as somebody who, and I don't remember if we've ever talked about this before, but is not like the biggest fan of Jim Carrey as a comedian. I find him like super compelling as dramatic actor, and I think that this is like just an absolutely perfect role for him.
Well, that's funny because that's like similarly to how I feel.
Mm.
I like him in like the Truman Show. I love that movie,
Yeah, same, right.
and even like the smaller movie called The Majestic, where he plays a more dramatic role. I like that
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. So yeah, I'm with you. I find even though he's known as a comedian, I find his comedy kind of like um, overbearing in a way. Um, it's a lot in your face, and but I liked his dramatic roles.
Yeah, for sure, same. Cool. Okay, so the first movie I'm gonna mention
Well,
here.
John, well,
Yeah,
I wanna ask you about your list in the terms of when I was thinking about my 10, I didn't necessarily just go straight my favorite movies of all time.
yeah.
I thought about maybe something in like what I would think in like the cultural pantheon of like what these films are. And there's
Oh,
certainly
interesting.
films in my life that I think I would give 5 stars that I don't necessarily believe are like the best films of all time. One of those is like The Matrix.
Yeah.
I love that movie. uh, I've seen it maybe 40 times,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't consider it like a top 10 best picture
Yeah.
of all time.
I guess for me, I was, I kind of did do my, I don't know if these are like, so basically, I just started writing down all the titles that I thought I wanted to think about, and I went through my letterbox and various lists I keep on there and such to just kind of jot down stuff that I may want to consider, and then I ended up with, I would say 7 that were like no brainers for me, and I guess you could probably say those are my like 7 favorite movies of all time. Um, and then I had another list of, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, another list of 10, which I had to narrow down to like the last 3 spots. And then I have an even longer list of things that like I wrote down because I thought I'd talk about them, but they didn't crack like the like, okay, you know, what's the cutoff here? And so I have a few different like tiers basically, and I have my 10, and then I have another 7, and then I have another like 12 basically. um are they my top? They were just like the 10 that spoke to me in that moment. I think, like I said, the 7 were for sure my 7, and then like how do I choose 3 out of these last 10? It's just like they felt right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. in 10 years when we do this again, like I might choose different movies and maybe the whole list looks different. But
Well,
at that time, I was like, yeah.
hopefully we're still podcasting together in 10 years.
Hopefully, we're all still here in 10 years.
Yeah.
But speaking of 10, my number 10 that I chose was Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. And this is his second movie. It came out in 1978. It stars Richard Gere, Brooke Adams, Sam Shepard, and Linda Manns. It is, I think it has probably my all-time favorite score in a movie from Ennio Morricone, which you hear just like everywhere, I feel like, right? And on top of that, I also think that the just photography is spectacular, and it takes place on like a farm in like Texas, and it I feel like it's like exactly the right mix of like having a plot and not having a plot. Like all of his movies kind of like straddle that line, and some fall harder on one side and some fall harder on the other side. And this one just kind of like walks the tightrope, I think, as well as any of his movies. And it's just, I guess, part of the reason why I chose it of amongst some of the other ones is that it felt so different amongst all the other movies that I had like kind of designated for this sort of spot, and that maybe made it stand out a little bit more. But I really like it. It was actually the sort of notable thing for me is it was the first ever Criterion Collection DVD. I guess you could, at the time I didn't have a Blu-ray player, so I bought the DVD, but it's the first ever movie in the collection that I own. So it's kind of fun. And I remember after I saw it, it was probably like a few months before The Tree of Life came out, and I had never seen any of Malick's movies. But after I watched this, I was just like kind of entranced, and I went and I watched like the other, I think, three that were available: the Badlands, which is his first, and then Thin Red Line, and then The New World, all kind of in a row before I got to see The Tree of Life, like not too long after that. So it's kind of a fun little stretch there. And I'm not as big a Malick fan as I was back in 2010, 2011 when I first watched this, because I haven't been like wild about most of what he put out after The Tree of Life. But I think as far as like first five movies in filmography, like it's hard to beat this.
Yeah, I think it's definitely with Terrence Malick. It is a before Tree of, it's like Tree of Life and before, and Tree
Yeah.
of, like after Tree of Life.
It's just so funny because like all of a sudden he's like, oh, I want to like churn out a ton of movies every year now, and like they kind of stopped being good.
Yeah, as special.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's probably more appropriate because I think some of them are good, or some of them at least have good moments, but they just aren't on the level that the first five were.
Yeah,
But Days of Heaven is my favorite, and cracked my top 10 there.
yeah. I think I've seen all the pre Tree of Life and Tree of Life itself, and I think I probably lean towards Badlands as my favorite Malick film.
Sure.
I think I like all of them, and I am definitely an admirer of the cinematography of Days of Heaven for sure.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Let's see. So number 9 for me was the film The Double Life of Veronique
Oh,
by
beautiful.
Krzysztof Kowalski, and starring Irene Jacob. And it's funny, this movie kind of has like that being John Malkovich kind of feel to it, because it has like a lot of like marionette stuff going on.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I was just thinking of sort of like feels like we're watching somebody in a very like you know uh a godlike narrator sort of way.
Yeah, for sure. And it's another like one of these high concept films, like not unlike Eternal Sunshine, where you have this woman who's like a classically trained singer, and she's like the lead of the singers for this orchestra, and what happens to her is felt by like a doppelganger almost of herself, and
Right.
it is located somewhere else. And it's funny, they have like uh, a moment where they're both like almost in the same vicinity, but they never actually meet. and when a tragedy befalls one of them, the other one feels as though something in her life is missing, and she kind of has to unravel that. And I just think it's a fascinating movie. I love his Three Colors trilogy as well, the blue, white, and red movies. Irene Jacob also appears in red. But
Mhm.
I this one for me, I think this was the first one of Kowalski's movies that I saw. So it just made a really big effect on me, and um, I'm sad that he didn't live longer to make more movies, but um, this is this is also one of my favorites.
I really like this movie too. It wasn't something that I necessarily considered, but I think it's totally a great choice. I remember watching this. I don't remember when exactly, but I own the Blu-ray, and probably like the pivotal scene. Roughly halfway through the movie or so, and there's some singing, and it's really just haunting. And my wife, who was not watching, like kind of walked through and was just like, "What are you watching?" And I sort of, it's like, "This is Polish movie." And she sort of sat down, I was like, "This looks like really kind of interesting." I was like, "It's really good." So yeah, great choice. I'm a big fan.
Wonderful. What's your number 9, John?
So my number 9 is my favorite. A lot of these are going to be favorite movies from
Yeah.
favorite directors of mine, but this is my favorite movie from writer director Quentin Tarantino. And ironically, I think it's his only movie that's not an original screenplay. It's 1997's Jackie Brown. So this kind of qualifies under your Matrix, which is like maybe this is not going to be on a lot of historical lists of best movies, but this is my list, and it's it's just for me one of the most like entertaining movies there is, and I really think that like by adapting an Elmore Leonard novel, um, he kind of gets out of his own way a little bit. I do love like most of Tarantino's movies, but I do think some of them are like bogged down in kind of his pretension a little bit, and this one just never feels that way. And I think Pam Grier is amazing, and I think Robert Forster is amazing. I think Robert Forster is like gives one of my favorite performances ever in this movie. He's just so good and honest and um, earnest, I guess I should say, is probably a better way. But he's great, and Robert De Niro is insane in this movie, and Samuel L. Jackson is insane in this movie, and Bridget Fonda. And I can just go on and on. Like, there's so many like wonderful, hilarious moments, and I think that like the story itself too is just like, really kind of keeps you on your toes, and it gives Tarantino a chance to like do some of the things directorially that he likes to do. But I think again, like it's in service of a story that like can stand on its own 2 feet, and doesn't feel like so like I don't know. I guess like preachy. I'd say some of his movies can be so. So I think that this is, definitely my favorite movie of his. I like always kind of felt like that, and I know some people think it's weird. It's a weird choice, but like I watched all of his movies. Like I think within the last year, like it was around Christmas time, roughly, and like I had absolutely no doubt after watching them all that like Jackie Brown definitely is my favorite.
Yeah, that's certainly another director that I'm very familiar with, and I remember we talked not that long ago about how I hadn't seen Jackie Brown, and it was like the last Tarantino movie I needed to see, and I did end up seeing it finally.
Yeah, I think I was probably like really like pushing you to that, right? I was probably giving you my Jackie Brown, this is his best movie spiel. And so this might be redundant, but
No, yeah, and I think I think it's a great movie. I it is different than a lot of his movies, in the way that certain events happen within its structure. But at the same time, like some of the craziness that
yeah, it
Kubrick
it
thrown in
all
there.
works, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like maybe part of it is the other thing that I love. And this didn't make my list, but one of my other very favorite Tarantino movies, I guess if you want to call it that, is True Romance, which of course wasn't directed by him; it was just written by him, but it was directed by Tony Scott. And I think like it's enough Tarantino without being too much Tarantino. And so maybe like when he's just writing or he's just directing, like something like speaks to me more than when he's doing both. And I do love, a lot of his writer director movies, but I also have issues with most of them, I'd say.
Right.
So yeah, so that's my number 9.
All right. So my number 8 comes from a director that will be familiar to everyone who's listening to this podcast, and that is one Mr. Steven Spielberg. It's certainly difficult to pick one Spielberg film in the pantheon of all of his movies, and certainly I always think about like what ones I think are the best, and those kind of like change frequently.
Yeah.
Today, I'm picking Jaws as my favorite Spielberg movie, and it's my number 8. For maybe the last 3 years, I've made it a kind of annual thing where I'd watch it around the 4th of July holiday, set up perfectly with the timetable that Jaws takes place. Of course, the movie is about a killer shark that invades the waters of a beach community off of Cape Cod. The film was actually filmed in Martha's Vineyard, even though it takes place on the fictional Amity Island.
Right.
And Roy Schneider is a new cop who is actually the sheriff of the town, and he doesn't like water. He has this great line where he's like, "It's only an island if you're looking at it from like the sea. Otherwise, like you feel like you're on like a big continent." And like they make a joke like, "Well, that's one way of looking at it." And it's funny because I think every time I watch it now, it's very much like the story of two different movies almost, because like there's a very defined split point where it turns it from like this thriller where the shark is attacking on land to where they're all getting in the boat, and that is almost like a different experience almost.
Yeah.
Like people would tell you maybe that they like certain parts of Jaws, and like it's not so much that it's two different parts like Full Metal Jacket is, right? Those are definitely two different stories, but it definitely feels like here's the land stuff and here's the sea stuff, and we kind of combine them into making this excellent picture that has a lot of fantastic performances. It feels as relevant as ever in 2022 with them trying to keep the beaches open no matter what, and the pandemic rolling through our world.
That's funny.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I just think that I think Jaws is probably Spielberg's strongest feature.
Yeah, really hard to argue with that. I mean, like you said, you can choose any number of movies, but certainly Jaws is like the one that put him on the map. And so you have to give him some props for that. I remember first time. I mean, we talk a lot about a lot of these movies and like watching them for the first time when we're for me at least in college or shortly after college, and kind of like figuring out like where what speaks to me in this long history of cinema. But Jaws is something I watched when I was like probably too young, like 8. I don't remember. My parents, watched it. They're like, "Oh, Jaws! You should watch Jaws." I'm like, "Oh my god,
It's only rated PG, John.
I'm literally never going in the water." It's like not a joke. Oh god. But yeah, no, it's a great movie, and Robert Shaw is just like totally insane.
Oh yeah.
So it's good stuff. All right, my number 8 is, I'm pretty sure, a movie you haven't seen. And I think I know that because you've been assigned to watch it for going on 2 or 3 years now. And it is Warren Beatty's Reds from.
No, I watched it. We talked
Oh,
about
did
it.
you? Oh, you
Yeah.
did? Okay, my
Yeah.
mistake. Sorry, I didn't think you did, but I guess I just forgot. From 1980, 80 or 81. 81, my mistake, 1981. And it's just to me, this is like just, it works on two levels. It's a really, I think, really great love story between him, Beatty, and Diane Keaton. And it's like this one of these like really historical love stories in the vein, and epic ones in the vein of like Dr. Zhivago and whatnot. And then it's also, like a really good movie about a specific time in history and a lot of the really interesting people who are sort of shaping it. And you've got them in Russia during the Russian Revolution, and they're, Jack Nicholson pops up for a spill as Eugene O'Neill, and Maureen Stapleton is in the movie. She won an Oscar. She was just absolutely wonderful as Emma Goldman, the feminist. And to me, it's just like it does so many things really, really well. And I find it like, it's a really long movie. It's 3+ hours, but it just like checks off kind of all these boxes and doesn't really miss a step as it's jumping from, really sort of like heavy plot line to heavy plot line. And there's a lot of ways it could have gone way wrong, and I don't think it does. So it's my number 8.
It doesn't really matter if you're 3+ hours if you're connecting with
Oh,
everything
totally
during
not.
that
I mean,
time.
and I've told you my theory before, which is all movies should either be less than 90 minutes or more than 3 hours. So I have no problem with that as long as you're like, giving us enough good material to make it work. One of the other things that Reds does, which I love, and like a few other movies do this, is like it's got these sort of interviews interspersed throughout with like the real people who are all really old, who like were around during the era, and knew these people, and I find that just like super interesting. I love like interviewing old people, I guess, like when they do it in When Harry Met Sally, it totally works. When they do it in Reds, it totally works. I really kind of wish they did it in Moneyball, which was supposed to be how Moneyball was made. But there's probably a few I'm missing, but
I
like,
think they do it with some of the survivors in Schindler's List too, don't they? Like,
oh yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. It's not a movie I've seen a number of times,
right,
but I'm pretty sure.
understandably.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I think Reds, it's just is a terrific, terrific movie.
Alrighty. Another film that certainly, actually, it's funny. This is one of those films that like would traditionally be on like one of these lists, but I don't necessarily feel bad about it because it's my list. And damn it, I love this movie. And my number 7 is Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Uh-huh.
And you could pick a bunch of Kurosawa movies. John and I did a
Mhm.
series on Kurosawa movies maybe a
That was
year or
right in
two
the
ago.
pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, and I had him watch these absolutely joyous movies, but I did not assign Seven Samurai for him. It is an epic. Uh, Same with the idea of Reds of being a 3 hour and 30-minute film, um, but it earns every one of those minutes. The film has this story where this village is attacked by bandits, and the village has like nothing, but they are clinging to survival. So their idea is that they're going to take what means that they have and go into the village and try to into the main big village, right, and try to hire some samurai to protect them when the bandits come around again after the harvest is ready. And it's just like the characters are all really unique and memorable. Certainly, Toshiro Mifune uh, makes an indelible impression on this film. He might not be uh, one of the top maybe 3 or 4 characters in the movie, but every scene that he appears in, he certainly steals. Um, of course, Seven Samurai would go on to be um, remade countless other times, and movies that people really love, like The Magnificent Seven and or Bug's Life. But give me the original. I really love Seven Samurai, and for my money, even the ending, like siege on the town, is like just still really captivating, compared to even like films that have maybe way more technology and budget that are coming out in this day and age. I still think like that Siege is really exciting and entertaining. John, do you have a history with Seven Samurai?
No, actually, I haven't seen it.
Oh,
Unfortunately, one of those big blind spots I still have. I when we talked about Kurosawa, I really haven't seen like too many of his movies. I think I watched Ikiru for the first time for that podcast.
you did.
And maybe rewatch something that I had here, um, yeah, that's just one of his, probably the biggest movie of his that I haven't seen in terms of its acclaim and popularity and whatnot.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I mean, certainly when even discussing the Criterion Collection, I think it's one of the crown jewels of the entire collection. So,
Yeah, and it fits my should be more than 3 hours criteria too, I think.
yes, it does.
Uh, this my next movie is not going to do that. It's closer to 90 minutes. I don't remember how long it is, but it's definitely not approaching 3 hours. And this is I mentioned up front, like I had a top seven, so we're in sort of my now like pretty. I wrote these seven in pen. The other three are in pencil. But my number seven here is Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee's 1989 movie about a riot that breaks out in Brooklyn on the hottest day of the year. And I mean, I'm not really sure like what there is to say about this movie that hasn't already been said. But it's so like it's an essential movie in a way that pretty much I think everything else I'm going to talk about isn't. And it is really well acted by everybody. I know. I think we lost Danny Aiello fairly recently, and just looking at the cast list, I think we lost Ruby Dee fairly recently too. We lost Bill Nunn fairly recently. So a lot of actors here unfortunately are no longer with us. But this movie I think is pretty much the crowning achievement for um, everybody who's in it. And I think that he creates this world like really vividly between how hot it is. You can sort of feel how hot it is, and it's it's on the screen in every single moment to the Dutch angles and just sort of how askew everything is, and the music. It's just all like very very like lived in and vivid, and I think again like it's an important movie in a way that I don't think anything else I'm going to talk about is, and in a way that probably very few other movies are.
Well, I agree with you, John, that this is a stone cold classic.
Yeah,
I think I would maybe hesitate to say whether or not it's Samuel L. Jackson's most pivotal role
it's
because he's been in so
probably
many things.
the
It could
yeah,
be
just because he's not like the biggest part of this movie. I think
right.
that's like a fair point. And
Um,
I'm reserving the right to change my opinion on John Turturro depending on how Severance plays out.
yeah. What about Giancarlo Esposito? I mean, Breaking Bad's kind of big. Maybe
Yeah,
it's not
but bugging
as
out
important.
is like a ridiculously like a critical character in this movie.
Yeah, it's not quite Do the Right Thing. John, I don't know how many times we've talked about Do the Right Thing, but I'm gonna reshare this story that when my like college orientation, it was like the required that everyone go watch this movie in the auditorium,
Uh,
and that was my first time that I'd ever seen Do the Right Thing, and I remember feeling so naive because I was like, "Oh, why are we watching this movie? We don't have that much racism problems, and this feels like something that is behind us." And of course, now all these years later, and learning about life and things like that, I've learned that how silly and closed minded that opinion was. I think that Do the Right Thing continues to be relevant, no matter how sad that might be. On even to this moment that we're talking. So yeah, everyone should see Do the Right Thing.
yeah, I agree. So we're up to your number six.
My number six is the only animated title that I have on my list. It is Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away.
Okay, I thought
Uh,
I was trying to guess titles that were going to be on your list, and Eternal Sunshine was one, and this was definitely another.
yeah, I've probably talked about Spirited Away many times, or at least in the context of it being my favorite Miyazaki film. I remember seeing it for the first time when it came out, all those years ago. I think it was almost like 20 some odd years ago, 19 years ago, and just being absolutely blown away by it. And the adventure of this young woman named Chihiro, and how she goes into this village, and her parents get turned into pigs because they're gluttonous, and
Right.
the only way that she can survive is if she kind of blends into this bathhouse full of mystical spirits and takes up a job, and doing so she has to give up her name, and it's her name is the only thing that could possibly link her back to her previous life. So she learns to hide that away, and yeah, it's a magical coming of age story. Certainly, the growth of Chihiro from being this whiny kind of uh, entitled young 10-year-old to how we see her like holding her own and then like having a job and navigating the world the way she does by the end of the film is quite big character growth, and not to mention the great character designs and world that Miyazaki created for that film. And certainly it's his crowning achievement in my eyes, and I continue to love that film to this day.
Yeah, I watched that. I think was that another episode that we did.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. And I had never seen it. I really, really thought it was really a beautiful, beautiful movie. It was only the second Miyazaki movie I'd seen. Still, I think technically to this day, I don't think I've seen any others. It's just, it's funny because I really admired it, and I like The Wind Rises too, which was the first movie of his I'd seen. But it almost like you watch it, and I've had this experience before where like something is so good, you almost just like I couldn't watch any other Miyazaki movies after that for a long time because I was just like, it's just sort of like it was like lingering with you, you know.
Right.
And I remember doing that when I did like a big Jane Campion marathon, and I watched The Piano. It was the first time I'd seen that, and it blew me away in such a way that like I couldn't move on to the next like not that well received movie. You know what I mean? Like it just like didn't feel right. It just I mean I did eventually, but it just took me a lot longer than I planned. But it's just like, sometimes something just like sticks with you that it's just sort of like feels perfect, you know?
Yeah, and for me, it's certainly one of those films that I can't wait to share with my child when she's old enough
Sure,
to
I bet. Yeah,
appreciate
right.
it. So,
Absolutely. Cool. Well, that's an excellent choice. So my number six is the oldest movie on my list. It's from 1939. Of course, there was a lot of great movies in 1939, but mine is John Ford's Stagecoach, which I think you've seen before. I'm pretty sure we've talked
yep.
about it. So Stagecoach, like weirdly enough, is maybe the movie on this list that I've seen the most times. Um, and it's up there on movies just in general I've seen the most times, and that was because when I was in college, I watched it in part of like a intro to film class, and I wrote like two separate papers on it, and I watched it like a bunch of times that semester, just kind of getting myself ready to write about it in a sort of lengthy academic way. But I chose to do my papers on that movie because I just really liked it, and I wanted to like absorb it that many times and learn more about it and appreciate it more. And I feel like I certainly did over the course of that semester, and ever since, it's something that I go back to fairly regularly. I think it's a pretty straightforward story, but just for its time, the way that it's filmed is, I think, pretty spectacular. And the way that like it has all these different characters that you know could have been kind of, I think, drawn thinly, but he finds some humanity in all of them, or at least the actors do. Thomas Mitchell, pretty sure, did he win an Oscar for this or did he win it for Gone with the Wind? I think it was for this. But he was, like Thomas Mitchell has like the all-time great year of he's in like all of the great 1939 movies practically. And he's especially memorable here, sort of like the drunk doctor who nobody really trusts until they need to. But yeah, it's, to me it's just like the prototypical Western. It's certainly dated in a number of ways, but I think if you can kind of meet it where it's at, there's a lot of like flair that you just didn't see in movies like of this era that I really admire.
Yeah, John, it didn't really surprise me that you'd pick this one. I knew how fond you were of
Mhm.
Stagecoach, and for me, um, it probably would have been one of those honorable mentions. It does not appear on my
Oh, nice,
list, but
cool.
I really admire it. It's one of my favorite westerns. I know recently I had an opportunity to rewatch the Who Killed Liberty Valance, or the man who
Oh, the
killed
man who shot, yeah.
yeah, man who shot Liberty Valance, and I really love that one too. And it's like it's almost like late era John Wayne, where Stagecoach is like the beginning.
Oh yeah, big
So
time.
it's fun watching those two movies. But yeah, I love the way that Stagecoach is actually like framed and how the story is set up. I think that's really cool.
For sure, yeah. No, I think it's really well done. So top five, baby.
Top five. Okay, so for me, my number five is Peter O'Toole's and David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, okay.
Um, for the longest time, I thought this was going to be like a stuffy movie. Like, oh, who wants to see like this movie where a guy's going through the desert and, you know, trying to start a revolution? And I tell you, John, since I've had those thoughts, I think I've seen this movie in theaters almost more times than I've seen many other films.
Yeah.
I've seen it digitally. I've seen it on 70 millimeter twice, I think. I just I can't get enough of it. It is epic filmmaking at its highest peak. I don't think that they'll ever make a movie like this ever again. I mean, there were certainly other epics of that era. I mean, like one of my favorite movies. It was just funny. I use the caveat that since I'm Jewish, that's funny, but I really love Ben Hur,
Uh-huh.
and how magnificent that movie is too. But yeah, Lawrence of Arabia, Peter O'Toole is like, I think, one of the greatest acting performances of all time. Not necessarily just in that movie, but it's funny. I think like I looked up like who he lost to best actor, and I think it was like Gregory Peck and like To
Oh
Kill a
yeah.
Mockingbird. And I'm like, oh, for all the people he could lose to, I mean, like maybe I could understand that, but but yeah, I think this is like a fantastic movie, and I understand that it might not be for everybody. That there's some like really like weird caveats about the movie. Like I guess there's no like women speaking parts until like maybe like 2 hours into this like
Oh.
epic movie, um, which is just ridiculous if you think about it. Um, but outside of even uh, Peter O'Toole, you have like Omar Sharif in that movie, and he's incredible as well. I think if I remember, like I think Alec Guinness is in this one too, um, and I just yeah, big fan of Lawrence of Arabia.
It's funny that you say that some people or that you thought going in that it might be kind of stuffy because I've only seen this movie once and I found it kind of stuffy.
I get it.
But I'll be fair with you that like I watched it in college on my college like television, which was a big box or not that big of a box. Certainly not like in high def or anything. And I'm guessing that was probably not the right environment to watch that for the first time. So I'm well overdue a rewatch of Lawrence of Arabia, and I'll give it its fair shake
Yeah,
when
they just
when I do that.
I think like so Sony had released it in like this box set, which was like 5 other films in 4K, and so that was the only way to get it for a while. But then this summer they finally released it on its own in 4K, and I swooped that up right away. I was like, yes.
That's cool. I have for my number five is my obligatory entry from Joel and Ethan Coen. It's 1996's Fargo, which probably is close with Stagecoach in terms of all these movies and on the like list of how many times I've seen it. I couldn't say, but Fargo is for sure up there, and for me, it's kind of like their best movie. Obviously, it's so at one moment like really really dark, and another moment really bright and funny and twisted and clever. I think that the setting obviously gives them a lot of material, both in terms of like the characters they can develop, but also like the way it looks. It's really unique with all just everything so white, and then you get like these big bursts of red. And I don't know. It just to me, it's something I can go back to. It's sort of like comfort food in a way that maybe nothing else on this list is. Like, I just feel good when I'm watching Fargo, and it spawned like a decent enough TV show.
Yeah, yeah, right. I think they're even making more of it from what I've heard. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I really like Fargo too. I don't know actually what is my favorite Coen Brothers film.
So I have a couple on my honorable mentions, or one on my honorable mentions that I don't think would have cracked my 10, but was out because Fargo was definitely my 10.
Yeah,
And it's for sure my favorite movie of theirs. There's lots of really good ones though. I understand like that would be tough. If one doesn't jump to, your all-time favorite movie list like it does for me, then there are directors who you'd struggle with because there's so many like, 5-star, 4-star, however you want to do your classification, like classics.
right. Yeah, no, there's a lot of films of theirs that I admire, and certainly if you held a gun to my head, would I probably say Fargo off the top of my head? Yeah, probably, but I'd probably want more time to think about it too.
Totally fair.
um. Okay, so we're ready for number fours.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Okay, my number four is Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather Part One. And yes, I prefer part one to part two. I know nowadays uh, there's a lot of people who would say that part two is the stronger movie, um, but I think I've always enjoyed part one more. I like the narrative arc of Michael's a lot more, where he always of course Al Pacino's Michael like rejects what he want that he's supposed to be the next head of this family. I mean, his brother Sonny, played by the late James Caan, who just passed away. Um, he was a little uh, too intense to be the head of the family, and then the other brother Fredo was maybe not intense enough.
Yeah.
So Michael kind of fits right in the middle there, and I don't know. I think that The Godfather has everything that I love about movies. It has like you have the classic scenes, you have these massive shots. Certainly the giant wedding at the beginning of the film, and certainly all three movies in the trilogy have these big family gatherings at the beginning, but maybe none like Godfather One. And I think like everyone is working at their highest level. Um, I really believe that like if you want to say like the difference between one and two is like maybe two has since it has Robert De Niro in it, maybe you like De Niro more, or like Marlon Brando's only in the first one. I mean, like as far as the casting goes, that's like the most dramatic difference, I guess. But
Yeah.
uh I get, and I think like maybe people like two because it like plays with form in such a way. Like I don't know if it was the first to like really do that like prequel and sequel thing, but it certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
Um, so I get it, but for me, Godfather 1 is where it's at.
Yeah, I mean it's further up on my list, so I won't say too much now. Well, I guess I can just say, yeah, it's my number two. I really love it. I'm definitely pro Godfather 1 over 2. I think 2 is obviously a very good movie, but I don't think it holds a candle to the first, if I'm being totally honest. I think it's closer to 3 than it is to 1. I think 3 is also a good movie, but yeah, I don't think you've seen 3, right?
No, I did recently during
Oh,
the
okay.
I finally saw it when so they
They
released,
released the like the new cut.
yeah, the new cut, and I saw it in the 4K release, and
What did you think of it? Just out of curiosity.
it's a okay movie. I think that it does suffer too much from like having these lofty expectations on it,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah,
that even um I think that Sofia Coppola, like, if her part was even written better, I think like maybe it would have helped her, because like some of the stuff is just like really goofy, and
I know it's tough.
so like even though she might not be the best actress to begin with, it's like even the stuff that she has to work with is really difficult, and for the the movie to actually work, you really have to care for her,
Yeah,
and it's kind of tough.
it's tough. It's tough. I just don't think it's that bad overall, like the whole thing, you know. But anyway, that's a
and,
digression.
and
I
it's
think the
fun.
first one's just outrageously good.
I don't think I really loved Andy Garcia, and like I hadn't seen The Untouchables
Yeah,
yet, another film that I watched for the first time this year,
yeah,
and so I guess I'm a little bit more into Andy Garcia than I was,
yeah.
but still, it's not the greatest.
I think that's fair too. So yeah, so then we can skip, and maybe we'll have a redundancy, another redundancy. I suspect we will. But yeah, Godfather will be my number two. Jumping backwards, my number four is my. I had my obligatory Tarantino mention. I have my obligatory Coen's mention, and of course, I'm going to have an obligatory PTA mention. Any guesses?
um, it's probably like my least favorite PTA film, if I had to guess.
You think it's not? It's not. I think you think it's Inherent Vice because you know I love
Yeah,
that movie, but
yeah,
it's Boogie Nights,
okay.
my favorite PTA movie. I put There Will Be Blood and Inherent Vice on my honorable mentions, but they were not going to crack this list because Boogie Nights was a stone cold lock. One of my all time favorite scenes in any movie is when what's Mark Wahlberg and John C. Riley go to visit Alfred Molina, and the guy is shooting off the firecrackers, and they're playing. Oh God, what's the Rick Springfield song? I can't remember now. Anyway, and he's just like they're just like totally coked out, and it's like oh my gosh, like I can't believe this guy's second movie. Um, and it's just like, kind of like Days of Heaven was Malik's. You know, I guess I got a thing for a second movies. Um, but it's so. I mean, this is like just like Fargo. I think Boogie Nights does such a great job at like giving you really compelling drama and really funny comedy. And I just think it does it even a little bit better than Fargo because the laugh out loud moments in Boogie Nights are so much funnier than anything in Fargo. And I think the like really sort of like twisted dramatic moments are almost more dramatic and intense than they are in Fargo. That's closer, I think, but yeah, it kind of just checks all the boxes. It's got great music, great cinematography, really good acting. Burt Reynolds is great. Philip Seymour Hoffman is crazy. Just really great performances all around. And I just think it's terrific.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson as well. I don't none of his movies made my list. That spoiler for my top three there,
No
but
worries.
yeah, I think it's funny. Like sometimes I think There Will Be Blood is my favorite of his, even
Yeah.
though it's not one that I have revisited all that much. Um,
Yeah.
it's like there's other movies that I probably enjoy watching more.
I could see that. I mean, to me, like Boogie Nights is the best, and it's like entertaining in a way that There Will Be Blood feels more like a chore, even though to
Right.
me it's his second best movie, and it's I think my favorite movie of like the century that we're in right now. Spoiler alert, didn't crack my list, so nothing from 2000 on is going to be in my top 10. Um, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like I if I was gonna watch a PTA movie, I'm going to Boogie Nights. I'm probably going to Inherent Vice next, and I'm probably going to Punch Drunk Love. Even though I would say I like The Master and There Will Be Blood as movies. I think they're better than Punch Drunk Love and Inherent Vice.
Oh, that's
If
the
that makes
one.
sense.
Uh, I was trying to think to myself. I was like, oh, there's really no PTA movies that I really just don't like, and against the grain. And I think The Master is the one that I
Oh,
just
you don't
don't
like
like.
The Master at all?
No, like I think the all the like three lead performances are
Yeah.
phenomenal, but like I am not into that movie.
Okay, I understand. I mean, it's definitely excuse me, like the most out there, I would say.
Yeah, and I know that's like blasphemy to some people because I know The
No, I
Master
get
is
it.
very highly regarded.
I
But
love. I mean, I love it, but it's one that like it took work to get there.
yeah.
So we're up to your number three.
Okay, my number three is the movie I was watching the commentary of last night. I didn't get to rewatch a lot of these. I probably would have enjoyed watching every one.
I know. I was thinking the
um,
same thing.
if I had time to do it, but last night I turned on Ozu's Tokyo Story,
Oh, okay.
and I just like I don't find any flaws in this movie at all. But it's such like a simple story of these elderly parents who go and make the long trip to visit their children, and just what they discover when they get there. And it's long been thought that it's like a remake of Make Way for Tomorrow, and an equally devastating film where this older couple goes and visits their family. But here in Tokyo Story, the family is visiting their family, and they soon discover that the lives that they thought their children had are different than what they were told over the phone, and the children live in much smaller means than maybe what they elaborated, and also even though the parents have chosen this time to visit, um, their children really don't have time for them at all, and it almost cramps their lifestyle that the parents are visiting, and it kind of makes me think of like almost parent neglect in a way, or how we treat our elders, and um, the only one that seems to really care for them when they visit is um, the their their daughter-in-law, and she's actually widowed. Their son died in the war, I guess, and but she still loves the loves her parents-in-law, and she takes care of them and is excited to see them. And it's just a really moving film, and has to do a lot with mortality, and not only that, but listening to the commentary track, it's like Ozu was always thinking about contemporary Japan, and looking at that movie and thinking about like that was the Japan of 1953 is kind of like hard to fathom. Like now in 2022, it seems like almost like it was centuries ago rather than 70 years ago. Um, but yeah, I think it's a phenomenal film. It made me a fan of Ozu's for life. I also really love another one of his films that's constantly praised, Late Spring. Um, I kind of waver between Late Spring and Tokyo Story often about which one I like better, but I think that Tokyo Story is a little bit above it overall. John, history of Ozu and or Tokyo Story?
Whew, it's short. I've never seen Tokyo Story. I've seen a couple of his movies, but um, definitely not enough. I think probably the one I remember the most is what was the one about the TV, the kid with the TV?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. That one's like famous for like a farting gag that runs through
Yes, yeah, yeah.
it.
I can't even
um,
remember what it's called. It's just a damn shame. I was not prepared to talk Ozu today. I suppose this is the danger of us not sharing our list with each other. But yeah, Tokyo Story for me is a blind spot. So a good selection there, and something I need to catch up with along with the Seven Samurai from your list for sure.
yeah, from the 2012 list, it appeared number 3 overall.
Oh
Um,
wow.
certainly, more spoilers for my list. It is the highest film on that list that will appear in my list.
So no Vertigo and no Citizen Kane, I guess, right?
That's right.
Fair enough. So we're up to my number three, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is another movie that we talked about earlier, but it was not a movie that we talked about in our top 10 list. Can you guess what it is?
Uh, no.
It just had a sequel come out.
Oh, Heat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I like that movie.
Yeah, it's good. I really like it. As you know, that's why I want to see too. I'm gonna buy all the tickets for Ferrari. But yeah, no, I love Heat. I saw it in college. I remember I didn't know it existed, and like I was starting to get into movies, and it was somebody like I was reading somewhere that there was this heist movie with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in the same movie, and I'm like, that sounds cool. And I was like, oh damn, this is awesome. And to me, it just began like a love affair with that movie that's gotten stronger and stronger over the years, and just love how those two play off each other, and their characters, obviously are meant to be sort of the same guy, just with different lot in life and a different perspective on what
Right,
they're doing.
the different side of the law, right?
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's a lot of these movies on my list. They kind of, I've said this a number of times. It's just like totally delivers and kind of doing one thing, doing multiple things really well. In this case, it's a really great heist movie, but it's also a really good character study. I think it's also a funny movie at times, usually because Pacino's doing something outrageous. But it's just like a compulsively watchable movie for me from a director I really love. I didn't consider any others of Michael Mann's for my list. You know, at least in part because Heat was a lock for this spot.
Yeah, I there's a few Michael Mann movies that I really like, a few that I don't understand the praise for, but he is undoubtedly my favorite of his works as well. And when I
Yeah,
revisited it a few months ago, I was like, I said to myself, I remembered that this was very good, and I really enjoyed it, but it's been so long since I saw it, and that was great because I had forgotten a lot of it, and
nice.
other than like the actual like bank shootout scene, because like that one is like classic for its like audio
Yeah,
usage too. But yeah, it was really fun revisiting it. And yeah, as we speak, the Heat 2 book comes out today, and the Heat comes out on 4K. I guess Disney released it because they own that library now, so that was weird. Disney releasing Heat on
yeah,
4K.
that's really weird.
But yeah, there you go. Heat. I love that movie too. And you say like one of the things was De Niro and Pacino's pairing, and yeah, I'm sure that drew a lot of people to that one, and they're like, oh, from The Godfather, and see them like actually share scenes together and play off each other was really cool. And certainly one of the bigger moments is like when they sit down in the cafe together and they saw like
Yeah,
that they had
it's
like
such a muted scene, but
they have like a
very
truce
powerful.
together where they're just
Yeah,
like, I don't know, I haven't caught you red-handed yet, but we're gonna talk anyways. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So I
Uh,
already gave you my number two, which was The Godfather. So I think you can do your two, and then maybe we'll see where we're at on number one.
okay, so my number two could easily be my number one. I kind of waver
It's
back
kind of
and
how I
forth,
feel too on my top two. Yeah.
and both my number one and number two, I have these cool canvases that Shannon bought me, and they go through the colors of the two films
Uh huh.
in order of like with the scenes that appear in the movie. And
That's cool.
unfortunately, there's not a lot of color in my number two movie outside of the color red because it is Wong Kar Wai's In the Mood for Love,
Oh yes, of course.
and yeah, I I am absolutely in love with this movie. It's a story of two people who live in the same like apartment complex, but their spouses are cheating on them. And when they finally make the discovery that that is happening, they, in order to deal with the grief, they kind of decide to like meet up and role play what it would be like, and how um, the they imagine their spouses met, and through that role playing they find um they're gaining a mutual attraction for each other, but they decide that they'll never be as bad as their spouses, and actually um go through with that relationship. And I think like not only is that extremely heartbreaking, but like extremely romantic as well. And I am in love with Wong Kar Wai's filmography. Another film that could have easily been in this 10 is Chungking Express.
Hmm.
I love that movie as well. But In the Mood for Love, I think, is his masterpiece, and I just love this movie. What else can I say about it? That I mean, like the ending. There's another movie that is one of my all-time favorites that didn't make the list, is Lost in Translation, and it's
I was convinced that was going to be on your list.
right, it didn't make my list.
Yeah,
But
that's okay.
it's funny because both Lost in Translation and In the Mood for Love feature the protagonist whispering something into a secret or a place, and you never hear what they've said, and you're just
Right. Yeah,
supposed to
you're right.
like,
That's funny, isn't it?
yeah, you're just supposed to like imagine what it is that they said or what secret they're locking away. And maybe I'm a sucker for that.
They came out like pretty close to each other too in the scheme of things. Like
Right,
it
like
was
3 years
only,
apart.
yeah, 3 years apart, right?
um so yeah, I think that um In the Mood for Love is right up there for me.
Cool. Yeah, I should have remembered that that was going to make your list. It was an oversight on my part because I know how much you love that movie. But yeah, I would say for me, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm gonna say for after you make your statement, before we get to our ones, I want to do honorable mentions so that
Oh
we
yeah, let's do honorable mentions. I was just gonna say I was in the same boat as you regarding my top two. It felt like they're fairly interchangeable for me, and then there's a little bit of a drop off before I hit Heat. But honorable mentions, I have a number of them. I'll just read them off. But I would say like the next tier after my top 10 for me, there's seven movies that were most strongly the most honorable mentions. uh, so I've got Goodfellas, Citizen Kane, Jacques Demy's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, The Third Man by Carol Reed, Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme, and then I had two Hitchcock movies that one of them was almost on my list. I wouldn't have done both, but I think they're both worthy up here. Is Psycho and North by Northwest. And then, if I can really quickly do my longer list of honorable mentions, I excluded Doctor Strangelove. Probably would have been in my top 10 toward the other bottom half of it, but I can't because I have another Kubrick movie coming. Uh, Inside Llewyn Davis was my other Coen Brothers movie. And then There Will Be Blood and Inherent Vice were excluded because of Paul Thomas Anderson. And then I thought about The Matrix, The General, Buster Keaton movie, Grand Illusion by Jean Renoir, McCabe and Mrs. Miller by Robert Altman, Aliens, James Cameron, M, the German movie by Fritz Lang, Amadeus, The Day of the Jackal by Fred Zinnemann, Wages of Fear by H.G. Clouseau, Once Upon a Time in the West, Sergio Leone, Network by, what's his name? Sidney Lumet. And then The Royal Tenenbaums is Wes Anderson's honorable mention.
All right. From me, why no female directors might have made my list. Some of my favorite movies by female directors are like Travail by Claire
Mm.
Denis. I really also liked Cleo from 5 to 7 by Agnes Varda. I think like a lot of her movies are fantastic, and certainly uh, it wouldn't surprise me for a lot of people if their favorite movies directed by women are more recent, given that women are given more opportunities now than they were back then, even if it's not enough. But I want to make sure that our list and our conversation wasn't fully dominated by men. Um, for me, my other honorable mentions, like films that probably are my favorites that I wouldn't uh, necessarily either think that would be on a list like this or were just outside it. I know one that I had in my 10 spot was Panther Panchali, which is the Satyajit Ray
Mm.
film. And that was just picking one, but now that it's an honorable mention, I can just cheat and say the entire Apu trilogy.
Fair
Um,
enough.
I remember like individually maybe liking the second film more, but understanding the cultural significance of the first film and how well if that first film never happened, what that the Bengali film scene would have looked like. Um, then I feel like we didn't talk that much Bergman at all. I think like
No.
Persona is one of my favorite films of his. I desperately want to rewatch Seventh Seal again now that I'm a little older and maybe I can understand it better. Um, what else do I really enjoy? Yeah, Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation I really like. I don't think I'd put it in a 10 list like this. Um, over like I tried to not to put like too many like Japanese directors, even though I failed at that because
It's okay.
I had 3 of them on my list. Um, I guess other directors that I really like. I mean, if I was to pick like a Scorsese film, like I think like my rewatch of Raging Bull recently, like is
Mm.
it solidifies that as probably one of my favorite of his. Certainly, he has a number of fantastic films. Uh, but yeah, I think we've tried to hit a lot of different bases, John, and
Yeah.
certainly people listening. I hope that if they hadn't heard of some of these movies, search them out and can enjoy them. Ultimately, I think that's what a list like this is for.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun to just sort of like share these movies that we both love with people, and hopefully that you've heard us talk about something that maybe you've heard of but haven't seen, or maybe you haven't even heard of and now you want to check out. And if you do, then you should do so and let us know. And I don't know, should we do our number ones?
So we should just do it together, right?
I think we should, yeah.
Because if you said it was Kubrick, mine's Kubrick too.
I know. I sort of knew uh, that I knew this was going to be on your list. I thought it might be at the top. If it wasn't at the top, it was going to be close. And when you said that there wasn't much color in your number two, I was thinking, is it because it's the dark of space? And I was going to be sad. But it wasn't because you're saving that for number one. And I
Yeah.
think both of our number ones are 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, and I know recently we talked about like wanting to have like even an episode to talk about it because like I guess we both obviously really love it. Um, I think like even outside of the like non-linear kind of outrageous story that unfolds throughout the course of the movie, I think like it was such a landmark for filmmaking and
Yeah.
um like some of the stuff that they like come up with, their vision for the future, it's like they nailed it like 100%. And like to think like, oh, that movie like predated like so much of what we actually did. They
Mhm.
they just like nailed the science. They nailed what space would be like, and I endlessly fascinated. I think like there was a book like about the movie that came out not long ago that I bought, that I was reading through, that I loved. And one of the scenes, John, that I particularly am fond of is when he's doing I guess the one of the astronauts is doing his exercise through the facility, and since it's like a circle, he's
Right.
running towards the screen, and you're like, how the heck did they accomplish that? And then you see like you finally see videos, and like they actually like recreated like this giant wheel and had it like going.
That's wild.
And yeah, it's just like what Kubrick did to get this movie put together and everything. I love it. I think that it's genius. I think that it opens up so many questions. I think that even when its narrative does things differently, um, it's really entertaining. And certainly, if your argument is like the HAL 9000 part, and Dave and is like the actual focal point of the story, and where like people kind of attach a story to, I understand that. I mean, that's wonderfully entertaining, but I am a big fan of the whole package.
I
And
agree. I think the whole thing is, yeah, it all builds, right? It's like obviously you spend the most time in that section of the movie, but it's all kind of you get to that point because of what you had before, and what comes after is a part of that. So it's just, it all like flows really well together, even though it's sort of segmented.
right, and John, I've been kind of professing my love for this. Let's hear you for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like so much to add. To me, it's just like it's so neat to have seen like a space movie that's, for me, like growing up watching Star Wars and movies like that, and then to sort of see something that came before it that's so very different and like has this different idea of what space is, and you have really really long segments of just docking, right?
Right.
And just how slow it is, and it's just like, but it's
Yeah.
like not boring at all ever.
This is certainly a movie where I understand for other people too that this might be not be their bag in the same way that Lawrence of Arabia is. I mean,
I
like
get it. Yeah.
it's another movie that I have seen in a 70 millimeter print.
Yeah.
I during one of the film festivals. I mean, like I'm so happy that 70 millimeter prints of this and Lawrence of Arabia exist, and
Sure.
if those have led to my greater love for these movies, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't surprise me either. But yeah, no, for me it's just great. I have like one really quick story to share because we are running a little bit long. But I actually watched the first time I watched The Godfather. I was in college, but I was home for summer vacation. I went to the video store. Weird thing that used to exist, and I was looking through like the classic section because, like I said, I was just trying to like learn more about older movies, and I rented The Godfather and I rented 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I went home and I put in The Godfather first and I watched that. I was just like, oh my God, like this movie is like amazing. This is blowing my mind. And then like, took a quick break and then I put in 2001: A Space Odyssey and I watched that next. I was just like, oh my God, this is what an amazing day. And like to this day, that was the day that I saw like my two favorite movies ever back to back for the first time, and so it's a pretty special memory, and just hasn't been topped in either case. My second favorite movie that I watched on that day, I've never seen anything better besides the movie I watched after it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this was very fun. It was fun to try to guess your list and be surprised sometimes, but also have some expectations confirmed. And like I said, we'll do it again in 10.
Yeah, I mean, like, and certainly as we end on Kubrick, I think for me, Doctor Strangelove could easily be in a conversation of
Yeah,
some of my favorite films.
those are my top two for him for sure.
I know a lot of people really love Barry Lyndon,
That's
maybe a
my
little
number
bit more
my
than
number
me.
three.
Yeah. He has a lot of fantastic movies.
Obviously, yeah, yeah. You can go on and on, but yeah, no, really, really good stuff. Fun list, fun exercise. Thank you for putting us on this path to putting this episode together.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
make sure to put our list of our 10 in Letterboxd if people are interested
oh,
in
that'd be
checking
fun.
that
Yeah.
out and watching them for themselves.
Okay, cool. I think we'll probably skip what we've been watching unless you have like a super quick shout out you wanted to give.
No, I'm gonna look at the two that I put down here, and no, I can skip those.
Okay, we'll save them for maybe next episode if nothing else more interesting comes up. But before we go, we would be remiss if we didn't share how you can follow us and keep up with us. Max, you're on Twitter at,
MH Colville.
and our podcast is at It's the Pick Pod. You can also like us on Facebook at It's the Pictures, and you can send us an email at itsthepictures@gmail.com with thoughts on our respective lists and maybe share one of your own. We'd be more than happy to hear your feedback and to share your list on our show. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcatching app. Just search for It's the Pictures. And while you're there, if you leave us a 5-star review, it'll help other people discover and enjoy the show. You can follow us, as Max mentioned, on Letterboxd and check out our list in Letterboxd form, as well as, kind of keeping up with what else we've been watching lately. And finally, you can subscribe to the newsletter. It's thepictures.substack.com. And Max, why don't you tell folks what you've been writing about of late?
Yeah, I reviewed this movie out of it was premiered at Sundance, but now it's getting a little bit wider release from Bleecker Street, and it's called A Love Song, and it stars actress Dale Dickey in it, and
Oh, she's
it's
good.
a yeah, it's a pretty I guess it's a light movie. It's about a woman who is out at a campsite, really, and you're not sure why she's there at first, and the movie kind of unfolds and really reveals why she's there. It's different than the movie Land that came out like a year or two ago, where the lead in that one was really just trying to escape life and like kind of end things in a way because she was so depressed. This one's kind of different. It goes in a slightly different way, but it's charming and moving. It's called A Love Song. If you're interested in seeing the review that I wrote for the movie, it's on the Substack newsletter. And then I also did a ranking of Bluey episodes. And John, I don't think we've ever talked about Bluey on air together.
Uh-huh.
But Bluey is, I'll say, it's a family show
Okay.
about an Australian cartoon dog family,
Oh,
and it's really cute. 7 minute episodes. I watch them with my daughter and wife like every night, but some new episodes are coming to Disney Plus in a few days after we record this, and I know a lot of people are looking forward to those, me included. And I think like the show, even though it is a family show that only runs 7 minute episodes, I really look forward to the episodes and watching them myself. I think it's one of the better kids family shows out there. And if you have Disney Plus, I wrote a list of 10 different episodes that I think show the best of Bluey if you're interested in checking that out. And then finally, I will be recording another podcast tomorrow night from when I record this. I will be appearing on the Film Trace podcast, talking about the films In Bruges and Hot Fuzz. I'm not sure exactly what those films have in common yet. I will, I guess I will find out when I'm on the show.
that sounds cool. I should probably also mention that we recorded a new episode of my other film podcast, There Will Be Pod, last week, and that's out. And we talked a little bit about movies that came out in July. And we did a pretty fun game where we went through the history of the American box office, which it was a little bit more specific than that, but I'll let you listen and find that out for yourselves. So very cool. Again, thank you so much, Max.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
We'll talk to you all again soon.
Bye.